So today we are here with a Democratic candidate for PA's 7th District in the House of Representatives, Carol Obando-Derstine. Carol, would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself?
First of all, great job on the pronunciation. Obando-Derstine. Nailed it,
Thank you,
Rocky.
thank
I
you.
love it. All right, so I'll tell you a little bit more about myself. The reason why I got in is because of two reasons. I was tired of watching working families struggle to make ends meet, oftentimes choosing between heating and eating, while politicians like our Congressman Ryan McKenzie vote to make their life worse. And the other reason is because I am horrified at what I'm seeing with Trump's militarized ICE, who's making it feel like it's a crime to be Latino in America. That's not right. I'm not going to just sit on the sidelines and watch while my community is demonized. So I wasn't going to do that. And that's why I got in, because I needed to roll up my sleeves and make a difference. To go on further, to give you a little bit more background on my
Sure.
on who I am, I came to this country from Colombia at 3 years old.
Mm,
I was a young child, came here with parents who lived through a violent civil war, and they sacrificed everything for a shot at the American dream. And I grew up working class. Both my
mhm.
parents were in unions, and I am someone who lived through a lot of struggles and challenges. I lived through empty wallets, sacrifices, language barriers, a lot of stuff. But what I did once I climbed out of those struggles is I never pulled the ladder up from under me. I got to work helping other people get ahead, helping people achieve their American dream, because that's my love language. I am an acts of service type of person. I believe in doing things for others. I am even a Rotarian, and we believe service above self. That
Mhm.
is a motto of mine. It is how I live my life. So that's what I've done. And I came here over 22 years ago. It's where I raised my kids, built my name and my reputation here in the valley. And I led community based organizations helping people get ahead, preparing young people for jobs. Also taught at a community college, preparing people for jobs, because we oftentimes hear the phrase, the best anti-poverty program is a good paying job. And that's what I was doing. And then I worked in the public sector for
Mhm.
US Senator Bob Casey. I connected people to the services they needed. I filled in for him and gave him input for legislation. And the last decade, I worked at an electric utility. And I started off helping seniors, low income families, and small businesses reduce their energy bills. But I was hungry for more knowledge and a greater understanding of the technical end of
Right.
energy. So I started to do a lot on my own, just pick the brains of a lot of engineers that were at the company, and connected in a meaningful way with the program at Lehigh University, that's a master's of engineering in energy systems engineering. And just going to seminars, learning on my own, taking classes at night, and then eventually became a student there. And I went to school at night and studied energy systems engineering. And most recently at the electric utility, I was connecting companies to the grid. Most of them were renewable energy companies. So that's what I've been up to for the last 22 years. Actually longer, because I gave you my background of coming to this country as a child.
Right.
So yeah, I'm
As an
49.
immigrant at three
For
years old,
anyone
yeah.
who's curious, 49 years old.
All right. So you've described yourself as the only working mom, the only immigrant, the only Hispanic in this race.
Mhm.
And you note that about 1 in 5 residents in PA7 identify as Latino.
Mhm.
But representation, of course, as a lot of people might say, is a starting point, but not a governing policy
Mhm.
or a governing philosophy. What specific legislation would you introduce in your first term as a congresswoman that would directly benefit Latino families in the Lehigh Valley?
Latino families are just like any other family, and they are really struggling to make ends meet, just like countless other families. They're challenged with the essentials, with paying for the essentials: housing, healthcare, groceries, utilities, and family care.
Hmm.
I want to roll back in terms of costs, right? I want to roll back the tariffs that are driving up costs for groceries, home construction, and electronics. I also want to expand the middle class tax cuts to and then to roll back the tax giveaways that we gave billionaires. Over the summer, we saw with the Republican budget bill, it gave trillions, with a T, trillions in tax cuts to billionaires. That's not right. I also want to not just work on lowering costs, but we also have to look at the other part of the equation, which is raising wages.
Hmm.
We absolutely, like yesterday, need to raise the federal minimum wage. It has not been raised since 2009. What would cost $100 in 2009 is costing the equivalent of 150. So it's a dual, lowering costs, raising wages. I obviously can't give you all the other ideas that I have around lowering costs, but those are just the quick examples of how I want to focus on both sides of the equation,
Hmm.
because we absolutely need to do more of that. We also need to. I want to go to Congress and expand access to healthcare. What we saw again in the Republican budget bill were cuts to Medicaid. That's healthcare for vulnerable populations that are low income. We're talking about cuts in Medicaid that in the summer impacted over 16,000 people here in our district. And because of that, the Republican budget bill, we also saw that they did away with the subsidies so people could afford the Affordable Care Act. And over 100,000 people in Pennsylvania alone have dropped their penny coverage. So these are things that are greatly impacting folks and their livelihood and their well-being. And healthcare is really important to me, Rocky, because
Hmm.
many years ago I lost a friend who was 22. She died because she couldn't afford the health care she needed. So these things are not abstract or political for me. They're real. They're real life. And I met over the course of this campaign, I also made a friend who was telling me about how his family was bankrupted because of healthcare costs. So we're talking about life and death, and we're talking about the stability of a family to if they're bankrupted, what impact that has and the consequences that leads to because they're bankrupted. So these are things that I want to work on. And then the
Hmm.
other thing, of course, that we're seeing and was one of the reasons why I got in is immigration. Right now, Trump's militarized ICE is terrorizing communities in our district, immigrant communities, mostly Latino communities, Latino
Hmm.
members who look like me and my family. And I
Right.
can't stand and watch that happen while we are demonized. And they're targeting people just because of the way they look, not because they have a criminal background. They're they're untrained, not
Hmm.
sufficiently
Hmm.
trained. They're not showing warrants. They're just disappearing people, and that's not right. And we can't allow a government to just be unaccountable. That's not right. And it's personal to me because I came here at 3, and I know the immigrant experience. I have family who went through the asylum process too, and I have other friends who are DACA recipients. So I know firsthand what needs to be done. And what needs to be done is work on comprehensive immigration reform that's legal, effective, and humane. And I always underscore humane because we're seeing cruelty.
Yeah, and I would say just as a follow up, you're calling for immigration reform that's legal, effective, and humane, as you said. And I consider that to be, a very broadly appealing phrase for most people. And I'm just wondering, where specifically would you break with something like the Biden era approach to border policy, or do you break it all with like the Democratic Party's left flank. What sort of legislation would you like to see in this immigration reform? What would you like?
I I believe that we need to have a strong border. We definitely need to vet the people that come to this country. I'm a mother. I don't want to see criminals come in here, but
Hmm.
what we're seeing is a targeting of anyone who looks Latino or immigrant, black and brown communities. So it is not legal. What they're doing, they're breaking the law. And as I mentioned earlier, if we have to follow the law, the government should too. And I'm not seeing that from this president and his militarized ICE. I want to ensure that what we do with immigration reform is to hire more immigration judges, hire more personnel in the courts, modernize the courts, find efficiencies. I mean, I'm an engineer and I'm always looking to optimize the system. How do we do things quicker with less resources? I believe that. But right now, we need to also open up the DACA process and ensure that there are people here who came as children. I have a friend who came at the age of 2. She was 2.
Hmm.
She did not know she was undocumented until it was time for her, around 16 years old, to get her first job. And she went to her mom and said, "Okay, well, I got to get my working papers." And that's when her mom sat her down. So
Hmm.
we need to have pathways to citizenship for people who deserve it. And I'm telling you, Rocky, one of the proudest moments in my entire life, other than the birth of my children and being married to my husband, was when I became a citizen. I still remember that. I still remember that day. I was 19 and I remember what holding the flag felt like. And I remember holding up my hand and giving my oath to to this country. Those things, we need those pathways for other people who deserve it, and I want to work on that. I know that there we can do better. We can do better. Right now we're not doing anything, and that's the problem. There is no immigration reform, no willingness to work on it. I
Hmm.
don't see any leadership coming from our current congressman.
Right. And I would say, just for me personally, since I was born in the country, I don't think I may ever fully understand that feeling that you described when you first became a U.S. citizen, of holding that flag and knowing that you'd gone through the process and you are now a U.S. citizen.
Mhm.
Is that something you'd be able to like expound a little bit more on? I'm sure there are a lot of people, especially in PA7, because it's such a diverse district, that have had similar feelings or will have similar feelings. I'm just wondering if you could like
It's
expound a bit
just a
more on that.
sense of pride. It feels like my heart was overflowing. I Because I knew the challenges that Colombia has had, and I knew what my life could have been like if my family stayed there, and I still have family there. So it's knowing what my life could have been like and what my life is like now, that's what fills my heart with joy and pride to be an American. And at 19 I knew that very, you know, I knew that already,
Hmm.
because I had come here at the age of 3 and I had followed current events. I am a lifelong learner. I was always paying attention to current events. I knew what was happening in Colombia. I knew the violence. I knew what violence my parents had survived and what they had gone through. So that's never lost on me. I'm so patriotic, and I know sometimes people misrepresent patriotism and think that it's like in one party. I'm proud to be a Democrat, and I am proud to hold up my flag all the time. I have a flag outside of my house. I am a proud American. That is something that I will stand on any soapbox and proudly um, talk about America in a very personal way, because I know what it's like to come from another country and the struggles that so many people have as immigrants coming from lots of different countries with who are war torn, who have lots of challenges.
Would you say that that's kind of how you would like personally describe or define patriotism as that sense of pride and joy for a country that you know your life will be better here than it might
Mhm.
be somewhere else, a
Yes.
land of opportunity. Is that like patriotism to you?
Yes, land of opportunity. My parents, like I mentioned before, or maybe not in this interview, but I
Right.
talked about how we lived on a floor with just one bathroom. I shared a twin bed with my cousin for years because that's what starting over looked like. That's what
Hmm.
survival looked like, and that's what it took to achieve the American dream. We were hardworking people. We came here to give back and to just my dad had a couple of jobs actually when he first came, just to make ends meet, and we all pulled together, and that's what immigrants do. We pull together, we work really hard, and just quickly try to learn the language. I didn't come here knowing English. I was 3, so I learned English by watching Sesame Street actually.
That's about as good a way to learn as anything else, maybe
Mhm.
better. Now, you did mention that you're, as an engineer, you're constantly looking to like optimize,
Mhm.
whether it be a system or whether it be in regards to like immigration reform. So I was wondering, in regards to being an engineer, PA7 has a significant population of blue collar and fossil
Mhm.
fuel adjacent communities. And how do you feel you would kind of talk to like a Carbon County resident whose livelihood is tied to traditional energy about a clean energy future without it feeling like their livelihood is being threatened?
I talk a lot about workforce development.
Hmm.
And I have prepared people for jobs, good paying jobs, when I led an organization that worked with the 5 area career and tech schools. And I also taught at Northampton Community College, a career exploration class. So I talk a lot about how there are industries that have come and displaced people. It's true, and I am not ashamed to say that I advocate for a cleaner, greener energy future. But I also talk about opportunities to upskill and to reskill. That's something I learned a lot also in regards to the manufacturing sector when I worked at
Hmm.
Senator Casey's office. It was around the time that a lot of companies were going overseas and they were displacing workers. And there was something called trade adjustment assistance that allowed for their workers that were left behind to go to a community college or learn another skill. So upskill or reskill. So upskill is like just to continue something that you already knew, but like keep let's see, it's
Stay
just
up to
like
date, perhaps?
to acquire more skills around that topic,
Okay.
and to make you more marketable. And then
Right.
reskilling is just maybe going in a different direction. And so I learned a lot about that. I learned a lot about work WIOA, which is the Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act,
Hmm.
when I also worked for him. And I eventually became a board member of Workforce Board Lehigh Valley. So I do know a lot about workforce development and the ways in which the government can intervene in in communities and in industries where folks are being displaced. So we allow pathways to another career opportunity. So I am a proponent also of community colleges, strong proponent,
Okay.
because I just mentioned that I worked at a community college, Northampton Community College. So I realize that there are industries that and changes and new technology that we have to adapt to a new reality. But it's about giving folks support and allowing them to learn something new, or just learn something in more in depth, so they can have other career or job opportunities. So that's what I'm about. I really want to allow people the opportunity to advance and achieve their full potential.
Right. So, say if someone's livelihood is currently tied to like the fossil fuel adjacent sort of energy communities, um, from what I understand, you're saying you would like to kind of give people the opportunity to expand and learn about clean energy, and perhaps these people would be able to learn new jobs, and you'd like to kind of give people a pathway towards that, so
Mhm.
that rather than them having to lose out on a job because during the transition period to clean energy, we can work with these people so that they can also have their livelihoods tied to clean energy. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
because because we've always experienced advancements in technology, and that's human nature to then
Hmm.
adopt newer technologies that have a less that lower the impact to all of us. So we've seen that throughout history. We've seen that with the fact that we used to all, right, in the past, ride on horse and buggy, and now we drive cars. So there have been cycles where we adopted new technology, but it's a matter of ensuring that the adoption is responsible, and that we are giving people opportunities to adapt and to find new career pathways in the
Absolutely.
new technology
Uh,
that they're facing.
right. Absolutely. So I want to touch
You
on
can't stop
your.
progress. I guess that's the phrase, right? You can't stop progress.
Exactly.
Hmm.
Exactly. So one of the endorsements that you have is former Representative Susan Wild, and she's quite a respected figure in this district.
Hmm.
But she herself did lose to Mackenzie in 2024. Do you feel that there's anything that you would do differently than her, not just in the general election, but in governing a purple district itself once you're in office?
Susan is a totally different person than I am, and I am so grateful that she endorsed me. She had won
Hmm.
3 times, and I'm very, very grateful for her support. But we are different people and with different life experiences, and we're different ages. I mean, I'm an immigrant. I am 20 years younger than her. I'm Latina. So there's a lot of ways in which we're different. And I want to
Hmm.
just be able to build on what she was able to accomplish. She focused on uh, uh, lots of different things. And one that sticks out is the way in which she was able to lower insulin costs for seniors. So that's an example of what she was able to do around healthcare and about health prices. And I want to be able to just build upon what she was able to do. She was also a strong advocate for early childhood education and
Hmm.
universal pre-K. I definitely want to see that. I have experience leading. Well, first of all, I worked at a Head Start. So that's first and foremost when I was in college back in 1998. I'm not sure if you were alive back then. Yes, back in 1998, I worked at a Head Start. I also led a child advocacy organization, the
Hmm.
Children's Coalition of the Lehigh Valley, where we fought for more investments around early childhood education. So that's something that has been near and dear to my heart. In fact, last week I attended a breakfast, a panel that was focused on how we do just that, bring more investments in early childhood education. It's called the Early Childhood Education Collaborative. It's something
Hmm.
that the Lehigh Valley Community Foundation is spearheading, but it's a partnership with a lot of different entities, organizations, and individuals. So that's another thing that she worked on that I absolutely want to take that baton and also run with it, because we need to have more investments. It's smart. It's smart. It's good policy. It makes sense. It's where you get the most return for your investment. The greatest return on investment is when you invest in people early on, especially early
Hmm.
childhood education.
Hmm.
There has been so much research on this topic. There was a Nobel Peace Prize winning economist James Heckman, he and others have found that for every dollar invested in early childhood education, there's between $6 and $16 in
Wow.
returns.
Wow.
So it makes sense. I could go on and on. I won't, because I can be very verbose, but I love the work that she has done to promote early childhood education. I want to be an advocate as well for that
Yeah,
in
and
Congress.
when you talk about healthcare, it reminds me, or makes me think about something like Medicare for all. Just as like a quick follow-up question, would you support passing Medicare for all?
I support universal health care.
Universal health care.
Yeah,
Okay. So a step above Medicare for all.
broader. I want to
There you
make
go.
sure that to me, that's the goal. I want to
Right.
see that. But what we need to do immediately is to restore the cuts to Medicaid that we saw in the summer, restore the subsidies to the Affordable Care Act, make sure that we strengthen it. The other thing and better price transparency, we
Hmm.
need to have people understand what it is that they're going to pay. Uh, that's what at the meet and greet that I was at just an hour ago, we
Hmm.
were talking about a patient bill of rights and having more transparency before you have a procedure on like the range of cost that is going to cost the consumer, because we don't have enough of that. Also, the pharmacy benefit managers, there's so much opaqueness in the system,
Hmm.
and we need to tighten up the rules around pharmacy benefit managers and costs around prescription drugs, and have Medicaid and Medicare negotiate drug prices. There's a lot. The other thing, Rocky, that I talk about a lot and the other candidates don't, so I'm going to keep pointing out the differences. I met the folks that started the health systems engineering program at Lehigh
Hmm.
University. I met them when I was working at Senator Casey's office, and I have followed that program ever since. So I think they started around 2011, because that's when I started with the senator, but in any case, a long time ago. And
Hmm.
they're focused on optimization and finding more efficiencies in the system, because we we need to innovate. We have to find ways to cut out waste in the healthcare system, and they have come up with great findings through research that they've been doing for years. And that is another concrete way that we can improve the system. We can find examples of what has worked well, and I want to work on legislation to implement those changes. And they focused on better patient care and reducing wait times and how
Hmm.
to administer drugs more efficiently with less waste. These are all examples of projects that they've conducted at Lehigh.
Okay. And you did mention, being different from other candidates. So
Mhm.
I'd like to ask a question here on that, which is, you've made the claim that none of the candidates in this Democratic primary race have the experience that you have,
Mhm.
which is, a pretty bold claim when you have such highly credentialed people in the race. So is there like a specific case that you would give to voters where your experience could produce or has produced a result where a lawyer, a Marine, or a union president couldn't have produced that same result?
I am leveraging my experience in the nonprofit,
Hmm.
public, and private sectors. None of them have worked in those three sectors. And I'll give you an example. So, in the nonprofit sector, I talk about how I led nonprofit organizations, preparing people for jobs, and fighting for better legislation at the state and federal level to benefit children. I also am the only one that has federal legislative branch experience, because I worked for Senator Casey, and I filled in for him, gave him input for legislation, and connected people to the services they needed. They don't have that. And then I also worked for a decade at the local electric utility. I started off with helping seniors, low income families, and small businesses reduce their energy bills. I'll give you an example that stands out in my head.
Hmm.
When I was doing that, I remember going to the Salvation Army shelter and meeting with women, mostly because yeah, they were all women that were there in the shelter with their children, and preparing them for when they would transition out of the shelter and they would have utility bills in their name, and the preparation that went into helping them understand how to reduce their energy and how to shop for their supply. And I remember like that sense of like panic they would have, because they were
Hmm.
really fearful of then leaving the shelter and being on their own. None of them have that experience that I have of sitting down with vulnerable people. And those are the experiences that I outline here that happened in this district. But I also worked at a Head Start. I oversaw a food pantry. None of them have that experience of working at a Head Start in a classroom, overseeing a food pantry, and then back to my experience at the electric utility, and then becoming an energy engineer. I'll give you the example of what we are talking about all the time. It's always in the news these days, are data centers.
Hmm.
When I became a project manager while I was studying for my engineering degree, I worked in the transmission and substations group, and I learned about data centers there. And I've been learning about them ever since. That's 6 years of experience under my belt, understanding how these systems work and who they fail when they don't. That is real credibility around energy and tech that I bring to the table that none of them have. And right now, we need to send someone to Congress to work on guardrails, because there aren't any. And that's the problem that we're seeing, that local, state, and federal governments are scrambling to figure out how they
Right.
manage this, what's going to happen next. And they know that the public is fearful. The public are, they are seeing their electric bills go up every, every year over year. They've seen increases in their utility costs, and they're nervous that these data centers, that some of them are massive hyperscalers, that are, they're going to impact them in negative ways, and on top of the ways in which they're already stretched thin, on top of them not being able to afford housing. And right now, we know the statistic is, like, I think first time home buyers are now an average age of 39 years old. 39 to buy your first home. And then grocery prices because of the tariffs, and then childcare costs
Hmm.
have also gone up. So all of these are ways in that are stretching families to the brink, and they need someone who gets this, who understands how these systems work, who they fail when they don't. And that's what I want to leverage, and that's why I made my claim that I have uh, the a depth and breadth of experience that none of the candidates have, and I stand by that.
Now, you did, firstly, beautifully put. I wanted to quickly touch on one thing. You mentioned AI data centers in regards to like utility bills, and I was wondering, will the building of AI data centers, will that be a factor in driving up utility costs for
Yes.
regular citizens?
Yes, it has the potential, and that's the issue, that we don't have guardrails right now. And like I said, local, state, and federal governments are scrambling to figure all this out. At the state level, there's House Bill 1834, I believe. It's around ensuring that these data centers don't shift costs to all of us. There's a model ordinance, House Bill 2151, at the state level, that are trying to figure this out. We had Secretary Wright last year ask FERC for sent a letter to FERC to try to clarify
Hmm.
these rules around data centers. We have the PUC, the Pennsylvania Public Utility Commission, also trying to work on this, and right now they haven't released their large load tariff yet. The comment period where they allowed folks, utilities can comment, and average citizens, everyone can comment, that comment period is now closed, but everyone's trying to figure
Hmm.
it out. And we need someone who's actually connected companies to the grid in the past to go to Congress and work on this. We need guardrails. We cannot allow billionaire companies to shift costs to all of us in small businesses. And we also, not just costs, but we also need to focus on ensuring that we don't have other negative impacts from them in terms of power outages, water outages, or noise disturbances, and that we have
Hmm.
local people that are going to need to be at the decision making table, and experts to navigate this moment.
Right. We need to focus a lot more on the needs of humans rather than the needs of AI, let's say, or
Mhm. It needs to be also a pro worker agenda because I
Mhm.
realize that I'm making it more about energy, but there's a workforce component because of
Okay.
automation and the we mentioned earlier, displacements and the progress that happens when there's new technologies, and we know that it's already displacing people. It's already displacing workers. We have to make sure that this is a pro worker agenda, that we figure out how to update WIOA, the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, which is the largest workforce piece of legislation. We need to figure that out and how we address AI in that piece of
Mhm.
legislation and the other things that are associated with it. So I was just having a very in-depth conversation with a friend about about financial scams
Mhm.
and scams in general that
Right.
have increased because of AI and because of yeah. So we need to talk about privacy and bias in AI also because garbage in, garbage out, and there's a lot of bias. It, and that's how they're trained. It's trained on biased information, so it spits out biased information. So there's a lot of pieces, a lot of tentacles around this huge, broad topic of AI, and it's going to take people who understand the nuance to work on this in Congress.
All right. It has been amazing talking with you so far, given some great answers. I'm going to move on to a lightning round with questions now. If you can just give me an answer to that question, just a couple of sentences. I just want to try to keep it succinct for these specific questions. So I'm
Sure.
going to hit you right off the bat with the topic of ICE. ICE has been jailing detainees in warehouses. The conditions of these warehouses are inhumane. So, what's your position on ICE and these warehouses? And what do you think is a pathway to eliminating this practice?
I'm totally against this militarized ICE that's targeting people who look like me and my family. I'm horrified that they want to warehouse humans and children and separate families. I want to focus on a concrete fix to the immigration system, and reform it, make it legal, effective, and humane. And that's where we're going to be able to really address the root causes of why ICE is conducting itself. But we also have in Congress, we have the ability we hold the purse strings, and we don't have to fund ICE to this extent. Uh, we don't have to fund a militarized ICE.
Okay.
I don't want to.
Many
I
Demo-
don't want to fund. Maybe I'll make it like I do not want to fund a militarized ICE in Congress, and I
right,
will.
absolutely. I
Mhm.
absolutely hear you. I think many people would agree. So many Democrats have expressed great disappointment with Senator John Fetterman's opinions on funding ICE or on, let's say, arms sales to Israel. And he seems to side with Republicans more often than Democrats. So, in this time of a politician who is a turncoat, as it were, can we trust that you will govern according to your policies, the ones that you're running on, and that we won't have another John Fetterman on our hands?
That's where I tell the public, look at my record speaks for itself. I have a track record of helping people get ahead. I am also no scandals, no secrets, no drama, Carol. And there are instances now where the public is scrutinizing other candidates and are finding problematic information. We could have Fettermans. Yes, we could have other Fettermans. And that's not the case for me because my track record speaks for itself, and I have folks in the community who know me, who have worked alongside me for over 22 years. That's the difference with candidates who came out of nowhere just to run for this seat, and folks who actually have worked here and have worked alongside people who can vouch for that for me.
Okay, my next one is the Trump administration has been attacking, I mean, ruthlessly attacking LGBTQ rights,
Yes.
in particular, transgender people's rights. So, what's your stance on that, and how would you defend this rather vulnerable LGBTQ plus community?
First and foremost, I want the public to know, and this is, she's okay with mentioning this, but my sister is queer. And
Mhm.
I am horrified at the attacks to the LGBTQIA plus community. I am a proponent of fairness for all and treating and letting people live their authentic self. They're just trying to survive. The trans kid is not the reason why my utility bill is higher, and so it's standing up for all folks, and no matter who they want to love and who they want to be, they want to be their authentic self. That's fine, because they're not impacting anyone. They're not the reason why the price at the gas pump is higher, the reason why my groceries are higher, or that I'm paying more for my utility costs. I will
Right.
fight tooth and nail for every community, because I said it earlier and I'll say it again. It's either all of us or none of us. And I know that there are concerted ways that this administration is trying to divide and conquer. I'm not going to fall for it. I won't let my community, any community, be demonized.
It's either all of us or none of us. I think it's a great slogan. I have to say it. I think it's a great
It was
slogan.
Pastor Greg Edwards who said it when he ran in 2018. He endorsed me, but I love it, so I'll give him credit.
There you go. Credit where credit's due.
Mhm.
Well, as you know, PA 7, the district includes Allentown, Bethlehem, Easton, rural Carbon County, and these are all communities that are like have very different identities. So, how do you plan on connecting with these different communities despite all of those differences?
I talk about my upbringing. I talk about how I grew up in a working class home. Both my parents were in unions. How I worked 3 jobs in high school to save up for college because my parents couldn't pay for it, so I had to save up. So I get the struggles that they're facing, because I've lived them. I know what it was like to pay more for my childcare than my mortgage. How I would sit at the kitchen table and try to figure out how all this was going to add up. I get it. But I also have done the work to help them get ahead. I've prepared people for jobs. I talk about career and tech education. I'm a strong proponent of career and tech ed. How
Mhm.
I am a strong proponent of community college education. And those are concrete ways that we support families, and in a very affordable way. That's a very great way that families can send their kids to continue their education after high school. So I talk about the ways in which I've helped people get ahead, and that I've lived it and I understand it, and I won't forget it in Congress. I'm going to fight for them because I know what it was like.
So when you say like you'll fight for this district, are there some positions that you might have that you feel would garner some pushback, let's say in Congress? And even if there was pushback in Congress, if you felt that it was morally right, these positions that you have or these bills that you would like to pass, would you be willing to continue fighting for those despite the pushback that you might face?
I can't believe there's so much resistance against raising the federal minimum wage. I'm on this soapbox and I'm not going to get off this soapbox. We absolutely need to raise the federal minimum wage. It hasn't been raised since 2009. Are you serious? It's been that long that people are getting paid $7.25 an hour. Excuse me, to families all the time, to parents. Some of them tell me, yeah, they're making minimum wage, and they have to work 2 to 3 jobs just to make ends meet. That to me is a policy failure. It is not a personal failure. They're doing
Hmm.
everything right. They're working, but it shouldn't be that low. What cost $100 is now cost it back then when they first changed it to $725 an hour in 2009 is costing the equivalent of 150. That's not sustainable. People can't live and pay for rent or even a home making that little. And so that's something that I will fight tooth and nail for. And there is resistance, hence why it hasn't been raised since 2009. I can't believe there's so much resistance, but I I don't care. I don't care about the resistance. I know who I'm doing this for. I'm fighting for folks that are really, really, really struggling to make ends meet. And that's not right. But I also, of course, want to grow the middle class. And that's why I do talk about jobs so much, because that's the best anti-poverty program is a good paying job. That's how I got ahead. I used education as a way to advance myself, and I paid for my own way in undergrad, and then I just kept going to school to continue to further my education and prepare myself and get even better paying jobs. And I want that for others. That's why I'm doing this. I want this for others. This shouldn't be the American dream. Is it feels like it's on life support, and I'm fighting to save it.
Absolutely. And now I just have one final question, which is in 2024, as we all know, Trump won PA7. And how does your platform speak to all voters, even the ones who did vote for Donald Trump in recent elections?
I realize that there are voters who voted for him, for voted for Trump, but they're feeling betrayed. I'm looking at the surveys, I am looking at everything, and I'm seeing that there are folks who felt he betrayed them because they're not seeing lower utility costs, they're not seeing lower grocery prices. And they're seeing a congressman, Ryan McKenzie, that's sitting on the sidelines, that is not standing up for them, that voted to cut trillions in tax cuts and give trillions in tax cuts to billionaires. They're seeing that. They're seeing that he's not making time for them. I say the same thing that I said earlier to your earlier question. It's I tell people, look, I get it. I've lived it. I've lived through empty wallets, sacrifices, and language barriers. And I dedicated my career to helping people get ahead. And that's the Carol difference. It's proving that I have shown up for people, that I've shown up for vulnerable people. And I'm also interested in innovation and helping people to support small businesses and entrepreneurs. I talk a lot about funding cuts to the Small Business Administration. I talk about the fact that I served on a tech incubator. I want other people to get ahead and to be able uh, to scale up their businesses and to achieve the American dream. We have a lot of innovators. I love to be around folks with ideas, big ideas. They want to see it. They want to see these ideas come to fruition. And we have a lot of really smart people that are trying to do big things here in America. And I'm just so excited to be on this journey and meeting countless people who are really excited about the opportunity to just bring their ideas to market. And that's why it was so exciting, for example, being on the Ben Franklin Tech Partners of Northeast PA board of directors, because I was seeing innovators when I would walk through the halls and meet folks from all over a lot of different sectors, but they were there and they were trying to grow their business. So all of those things I think are what resonate with voters. They want to see people who have done the work, who have shown up for others, who want to make a difference, who um, want to grow the middle class and restore the American dream.
Carol, it has been amazing talking to you. I've enjoyed this immensely. It's been amazing interviewing you and listening to all these in-depth answers. I felt like, at the debates, everyone kind of had a very small window to kind of
Mm.
explain their position. So it's been great to get to hear your positions when you have more than 30 seconds to expound on them. It's been amazing. Thank you for coming here today to do this interview. I really appreciate this.
Thank you, Rocky.